Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Vicki Janowski, editor of the Greater Wilmington Business Journal. Thank you for joining us for our 2020 Wilmington Biz Conference and Expo, which we, of course, have moved online this year. And today we have with us the two candidates for North Carolina's Senate race this year for our keynote speakers. In partnership with WECT, we're able to show this on their channels as well as Facebook page. And we also have yesterday's keynote talk with Encino CEO Pierre Naudé available as well, either on the Facebook stream or on WilmingtonBiz.com. So I just want to jump straight in. We'll hear from both candidates today separately, and they will be giving 10-minute introductory remarks. And then the last 20 minutes is to hear directly from you guys to answer your questions of what you want to hear about in this race. So feel free to add your questions to the Facebook stream that you're watching, to our BizExpo conference platform, or you can text your questions to this number, 910-264-8955. That's 910-264-8955. And to start us off, we're going to talk to our incumbent senator. Senator Thom Tillis is here joining us, and he's a Republican from Huntersville who formerly worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers and then IBM. While a member of the North Carolina State House, he served as House Speaker, and he was elected to the U.S. Senate seat in 2014. So, Senator Tillis, if you would like to join on and go ahead and give your introductory remarks, we'll just jump right in.
Well, thank you very much. And I won't take 10 minutes because I like answering questions more than just talking, but I will take a brief moment to give you an update on what I think is the top priority right now in North Carolina and across the country. It's our continued response to COVID. If you think about where the Wilmington area, the coastal economies were back in February, I went out there, I met with a lot of people, and they said they had some of the best year that they had had in years. And then COVID struck us, the shutdown struck us, and the eastern part of the state was one of the hardest hit, that in the mountains, because of the heavy reliance on travel and tourism. So we saw a lot of restaurants, hotels, motor coaches, travel and tourism industry really grind to a halt. And it's only now coming back, and not all of them are. But that's why we passed the CARES Act, the Paycheck Protection Program, and the extension of unemployment, because we thought it was important to try and bridge the gap. And quite honestly, at the time, the scientists, the people who are familiar with the behavior of viruses really thought that COVID was going to be a 3 or 4 month challenge, and then we would be able to get back to some semblance of normal. But the reality is it spread differently than its two cousins in the coronavirus family, SARS and MERS. And it stayed with us. It even spiked up in the warmer months. So we're right now working on a follow-up to the CARES Act, which would provide additional Paycheck Protection Program loans. And many banks in the Wilmington area were absolutely heroic in providing these Paycheck Protection loans to businesses. About 80%, 85% of those loans were under $150,000. So they were for small businesses. But because this is going to be a challenge that now is going to take several months to recover from, we have to have an extension of the Paycheck Protection loan. We have to provide it to nonprofit organizations. They were not included, think YMCAs and other nonprofits that have actually been working hard in the COVID crisis and not getting economic help to bridge the gap. But I also think something specifically important to the coastal area are what I call the first in, last out businesses. So hotels, tabletop dining, and a number of other businesses. Some of them are still shut down or only running at 25 or 30% capacity, which barely and seldom covers operating expenses. So we've got, fortunately, we've got negotiations going on again between Speaker Pelosi and Secretary Mnuchin. The Senate stands ready, but it truly is a negotiation between the House and the White House. And then come to the floor, we attempted to pass a bill about 3 weeks ago that I think will be core to any consensus package that we put out. But I think that the economic response is critically important as we also advance vaccine research, provide funding for school openings, extend unemployment through the end of the year, and provide resources to the Postal Service, which had about a $9 billion shortfall in revenues because with COVID, you just weren't seeing the mailers. If a business not open, you're not getting those mailers and other things that the post office generally delivered. I hope that we can get it done, and frankly, I hope we can get it done over the next week or so. We just saw reports of the airline industry. American Airlines, most prominent in our state, announced the furloughs of thousands of employees. United Airlines is doing the same thing. They've all said that after we provide the follow-up to the relief package, they will likely bring many of them back, but it harms some of our regional airports the most. I was in Wilmington last week, and I saw the airport expansion that we've worked on since I've been in the Senate. I'm excited about that, but I want to make sure that we have flights and we have passengers that can get out there and continue to let the Wilmington airport thrive. But on the healthcare response, I think there is a reason to be optimistic. We have about a half dozen vaccines and clinical trials. 3 of them are in phase 3 clinical trials. That's about 100,000 people who have volunteered to go through the phase 3 human testing process. And I'm optimistic that we will have a vaccine that we first have to make sure we give to the at-risk population, then first responders and healthcare professionals, and ultimately to anyone who would like to take the vaccine. The last thing I'll leave you with, I hope that this is something when I was Speaker of the House, I worked to prevent in Wilmington. The film tax credits at the state level, I think is something very critically. If you think about ways that we can regen our economies, then you have to think about regional measures. And in the Wilmington area, we had a thriving film industry. Tax credits were reduced. I told my colleagues that I think that they were making a mistake. I hate it when I see that peach in the productions now, because a lot of the productions that would have been in the Wilmington area are now down in Atlanta and in Georgia. We need to get that industry back because I think the main problem is people don't understand that the film industry is a project industry. People are thinking about economic incentives for, say, a manufacturer. And they don't understand the fluid nature of the film industry and the impact that it has on caterers. If you think about how we help Wilmington come back, make sure we have a film industry so caterers, tradespeople, other people that are generally consistently employed just on different projects over the course of the year are ways that we can think about regional solutions. And by the way, I was also happy that we got Wilmington designated as the first World War II city. I think that it's another thing that will help us with economic development, and we need to work with business leaders to figure out what specific things either the legislature can do or what I can do up here in Washington to help us recover beyond what we hope to put into the CARES Act. But Vicki, with that, rather than going on for 10 minutes, I'd be happy to answer any questions you all may have.
All right, thank you, Senator Tillis. And again, if you have questions, post them in the Facebook stream or text them to 264-8955. So Senator, we have a question about another coastal issue that's pretty specific to us, and that's flooding and hurricane season. Obviously, we know during Hurricane Florence when Wilmington was cut off on the transportation arteries because of the flooding. So we have a viewer question that's asking, as flooding and severe storms become more frequent and severe, what can the federal government do to encourage resiliency planning into existing infrastructure and future infrastructure projects?
Well, Vicki, one thing that I've been working on for about 4 years with the Corps of Engineers is that we need a region-wide, and by region-wide, I mean not only North Carolina, but South Carolina and Virginia. The flood waters do not know state and county boundaries. And the first thing we need to do is have a region plan to figure out how we can be more resilient, how we can hold water upstream and manage water as it moves downstream. One of the things that I think we can do, and I've talked with some people in the Wilmington area about it, is how can we, if you see the hatcheries that used to be much further upstream because of silt and sedimentation, those hatcheries are moving further out to the estuaries. There is a way to, in an environmentally sound way, to clear those creeks and tributaries so that they can handle more water, and we have the added benefit of getting the hatcheries back to where they historically were. So that's one thing. Another thing, and I saw this in the wake of Florence and Matthew, is we have to do a better job of getting resources to the local level sooner. We've filed a bill and working with FEMA to allow, a city like Wilmington or a county like New Hanover, I think is probably in a position to be able to opt into a direct line from FEMA to the local governments to get the money there as quickly as possible as a part of the response to a storm. So think debris removal, a number of other things. Some other counties may not be equipped to do it, or towns. So I think what we want to do is eliminate as much paperwork, and in some cases, not go from FEMA to a state account and a state account released to a local government, but to allow the local governments to opt in to whichever one they're most comfortable with. And then the other thing we have to do is speed up FEMA reimbursement process. We heard sad stories of houses that were harmed with, excuse me, in a sequence of hurricanes. So imagine your house being destroyed by one hurricane. You've decided you want to be bought out because you know you're in a low-lying area and you should probably not rebuild there if you do build up. But then the delays with FEMA to actually pay the homeowners left them no choice but to rebuild the home. So we have to accelerate, and we saw some of that with even with Florence and Matthew, that what we're trying to do is, instead of having a visual inspection for a building that has been completely damaged, to accelerate the assessment process and accelerate the qualification process for buyouts, so that we can remove people from areas that are going, until we get maybe a broader water plan in place, like I was talking about with the Corps of Engineers. We have to give homeowners the opportunity to be bought out and move out of an area that's flood prone or at risk of being damaged when a hurricane or a flood comes.
Okay, we have another viewer question. Will you commit to doing everything in your power to ensure a peaceful transition of power if President Trump loses the election?
Of course. And I hope that everybody commits that no matter what the outcome of the election is, that we have a peaceful transition. I mean, that has been our nation's history. I mean, we're unique among many nations for making sure that when the vote is certified, the transition of power occurs. And I think that everyone, I know that that's a popular media subject, but I don't see any member in either side of the aisle suggesting that there would be anything other than that.
Okay, and another question about President Trump. Will you condemn President Trump? Excuse me. Will you condemn President Trump for not condemning racist, white supremacist, and militia groups, including the Proud Boys?
Well, I think any militia group at either end of the spectrum should be condemned, and I think that the president would probably serve those well, but by saying what I know he believes. He thinks that racism in any form is wrong. And I think that all of us elected officials should be out there saying the same thing. I grew up as a Catholic in the South, and at the time that I grew up, the Ku Klux Klan was still putting pressure on Catholics in the South. Whether it's the Ku Klux Klan, whether it's some of these newer groups, but it's any group at either end of the spectrum that needs to be condemned. And any group that uses violence to get their point across needs to be condemned. And anyone who harms a police officer needs to go to prison.
Okay, we have one from Brunswick County Commissioner Frank Williams, which is related to speeding up FEMA reimbursement process. Part of the problem is that it is so complicated. Any way to simplify it so that the average citizen who's dealing with the trauma of a damaged home can deal with it?
Yeah, Commissioner, that's exactly why we put forth a bill to streamline the entire process. But Brunswick County, sadly, has got a lot of experience with emergency response. I don't want Brunswick County taxpayers to have to pay for a consultant to fill out the paperwork to submit to FEMA to get a reimbursement, because every dime you're paying a consultant to do that is one less dime that you have to actually respond to the hurricane. And I'm happy Kyle Sanders, who's my Deputy Chief of Staff, and he's also emergency response lead in my office, has worked with FEMA to accelerate the process. There was a time about a year and a half or 2 years ago that North Carolina, the state, was designated a slow payer. In other words, money had gone from FEMA into a state account, but it wasn't being distributed. So while I was requesting additional resources, FEMA was saying, why are you asking for more resources when the state is actually not promptly moving those funds out to the local entities as quickly as possible? They've gotten better at it, and they have distributed those funds, but that's really what raised our attention to streamlining the process and also eliminating that layer that a county may have to go through with a state agency. If a county like Brunswick just simply wants to work with FEMA, with additional expertise to help you. I think that's the way that we get money there. You know, a lot of people don't think, or maybe they don't know what actually happens when a hurricane comes, but Brunswick County or New Hanover gets hit, the first thing they have to do is clear debris, and they have to do it quickly. So what they do is they start clearing debris, clearing streets, clearing trees, keeping the receipts in the hopes that they're going to get compensated. I really want to accelerate that first phase so that you just reopen streets, you reopen schools, and then for the follow-on, that's the clearing phase. Then there's the rebuilding phase. I think there's great opportunities to streamline that process. We've done some, but I want to put it in law so that we don't drift from administration to administration or FEMA administrator to FEMA administrator.
We have a question about water quality and the Gen X issue. What are your thoughts on why corporations like Chemours are not being held accountable and paying for the treatment system? And I assume that means water treatment systems.
Yeah, well, you know, we just filed a bill this week as a given individual citizens legal recourse for the toxics down at Camp Lejeune. I've worked on toxic exposures in a number of different areas. I think that there has to be some level of liability. The key is to make sure that science is driving it. It's very similar to a bill that we just reported unanimously out of Veterans Affairs Committee for toxic exposures for anyone who's serving in the military. We have to rely on the National Institutes of Health and others to say these particular substances are directly linked to specific illnesses. And if you knowingly discharge those types of substances anywhere in a body of water, something that ultimately could find its way to the water table, then you have to have some responsibility for that. And there should be legal recourse for those who were harmed by it.
Okay. And how about this question? What was your role in getting President Trump to include North Carolina in the offshore drilling moratorium?
I called them up and asked them to add us to the list. You know, it was that simple. It was literally a 15-minute, 10-minute conversation. And I told the president, I said, when we were first thinking about offshore drilling, everybody has to go back about 8 years, 10 years, and think about the fact that our gas prices were almost twice what they are today. We were importing oil from the Middle East. Russia was a key provider of energy to Europe. And we knew that we had energy resources here that could make us an energy superpower for the first time in our history. And so I felt like we needed to weigh into that and consider all things. That was also the time that I was working on the Senate Bill 3, which gave rise to the solar industry in the state. But at the time, I was saying we need solar, we need wind, we need to discover what other opportunities are out there. But fast forward 10 years, we are an energy superpower. The reserves that we have that are already fully studied, that have drilling operations going in place, are sufficient for a very long period of time. So now, if we just maintain the current capabilities and the current capacity, then we can keep energy prices low. We can give Europe and other countries an alternative to Russia for energy. And we just, as a practical matter, we don't need it. And that's why I felt like it was appropriate for us to be added to the moratorium. And the president was very amenable to it. I originally had intended to have it done when he first did the moratorium for South Carolina South, but he was very open to it. He understands exactly what I do. The world has changed since we were looking everywhere for energy to produce independence. Now we have that, and we can be more moderated in terms of where else we expand beyond the footprint that we already have in the United States.
Okay, we have a good campaign question from Airport Authority Chair Donna Gerardo, so I'm going to ask both candidates this question. What things are not true that your challenger is saying about you in their TV commercials?
How much time do I have? And by the way, I should say it's not just the challenger. I mean, everyone needs to understand $85 million has been spent in the state by independent expenditures just opposing me. I think there's an ad out there that talks about me not being friendly to veterans and me cutting support for veterans. We have done more for the Veterans Administration over the last 4 years that's been done in decades. The Veterans Administration was the least favorite place to work in federal government 4 years ago. Now it's in the top 5. Veterans have the Mission Act, so now they can go where they want to for care. Scheduling has gone up. They've done a good job with the response to COVID. And I have worked very, very closely, most recently with the TEAM Act. It's been endorsed by 30 veteran service organizations. That's almost unheard of because even the veteran service organizations have their differences, but they all coalesce behind a bill that just continues to move the ball for veterans. That would be one. You could get into any number of them, but the reality is I would just ask people to go to fact checkers, and many of them have been proven false or largely false, or they're so nuanced to let people believe something that's not true. I think there are some ads out there that say I want to end Medicare. That's silly. My mother relies on Medicare. What I want to do is make sure that Medicare is there for future generations, and if we don't work on that, that may not be a promise that can be fulfilled. It's really hard because there are so many, and I don't watch many of them. I will tell you though, my 3-year-old granddaughter does, because about 2 months ago, she stopped, she intermittently goes between calling me Papa and now Thom Tillis. But I think that the key is, if you want an informed vote, instead of taking my word for it, go to an ad, go to a fact checker, and draw your own conclusions.
Okay, everyone, and I know we're covering a lot of ground here, but just a reminder, we have about 5 minutes left with Senator Tillis. So if you have questions that you still want to get in, put in the stream or text it to our phone number. Senator Tillis, we have one about health insurance. What are you doing to assist those losing their health insurance?
Well, one thing that we did on the floor yesterday was attempt to pass a bill that I've been working on for 2 years. We first filed it in 2018, and it's to remove one of the things I don't like. I should have mentioned this when you asked about the ads, so the airport director did. Now, pre-existing conditions, anyone who says that anybody in Congress, or at least 97 of them, 97 senators, would deny you pre-existing coverage, just haven't been following the votes up here. Yesterday, I had 47 Republicans vote for a bill that I put forth that says, look, the Affordable Care Act is going to go through the legal process, and if it's proven unconstitutional, then we have to deal with it. And when the case first started, I said, let's at least take the language from Obamacare, because we have this thing called severability, and we don't know if the court was to strike down the Affordable Care Act, if they would only strike down some of it or none of it. But allowing your young adults under the age 26 and under to stay on your parents' health care, everybody agrees with that. Pre-existing conditions, everybody agrees with that. Then we got to figure out, how can we actually provide a sustainable solution to health care? The biggest problem you have with the Affordable Care Act, for people that say it gave 20 or 30 million people health care, is that most of the people that actually use their policies are only people who have catastrophic conditions, because the out-of-pocket expenses, the co-pays, are too expensive to use for wellness care. I was just talking with Senator Mike Braun, who's putting a proposal together so that people know, if the Supreme Court were to strike down the Affordable Care Act, they will probably also delay the implementation of it to provide Congress time to provide a replacement solution. We've assumed that since the court first went up, because we have to provide care. But I think people have to remember things about the Affordable Care Act that they've forgotten. There were promises, if you like your health care, you can keep it. That's been proven wrong. There were promises that if you like your doctor, you can keep it. That's been proven wrong. And also, through the mandates that were required through the Affordable Care Act, there were a number of businesses that moved people's hours down so that they wouldn't fit the threshold for being required to provide care. So some people got fewer hours. I've heard a lot of restaurants that said they had people working in one restaurant and another, because the restaurants couldn't afford to provide healthcare mandates, so they read the law and did what they had to do. And then I saw other businesses, Home Depot was one of them, that had healthcare, but when all the mandates came in, they took about, I think it was about 20,000, somewhere between 15 and 20,000 employees that had health care, maybe not everything that they wanted, but health care that could be for wellness care, a number of other things taken away from them. We've got to have a solution that incents employers to give more health care on their job, and those who won't have a job or don't have the option to provide them a health care policy that they can use for wellness care and things to make it less likely that they're going to have a chronic condition.
And speaking of the Supreme Court, should the Senate take up President Trump's nominee for a Supreme Court justice before the election?
Yeah, I think so. I met with Judge Barrett yesterday. I met with her over the weekend as well. And I think if people, anybody that really wants to know about Judge Barrett, just go on the internet, search Judge Barrett, Seventh Circuit confirmation, and watch that, watch her confirmation when she was actually put in the federal court as a federal circuit court judge. She's a brilliant academic, magna cum laude at Rhodes, summa cum laude at Notre Dame, first in her class in Notre Dame law, mother of 7, 2 adopted from Haiti, 1 with special needs. I met with her yesterday, and she's a brilliant jurist. I believe that we should have a confirmation hearing, and I'll leave it to the leader to determine the scheduling of the actual confirmation on the Senate floor in terms of timing.
All right, Senator Tillis, thank you very much for covering all that ground with us. I know we went kind of rapid fire, but we wanted to get in as many issues as we could from your constituents, especially in such an unusual election year, to have this chance to talk to both candidates. So I appreciate your time in joining us today.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
All right, and now up next, we will have the Democratic challenger, Cal Cunningham. And while he's joining on, I'll just remind you again, if you have questions, put them in the Facebook stream, or you can text them to 910-264-8955. If you're joining us late, Cal Cunningham will be giving some opening remarks for about 10 minutes, and then he'll spend the remainder of his time with us answering questions from you. So a little bit about Cal Cunningham. He is a Democrat from Raleigh. An attorney, he is Lieutenant Colonel in the Army Reserves, and he served in the North Carolina Senate from 2001 to 2003. Mr. Cunningham, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you. I'm really grateful for an opportunity to be with you. I know that we'd rather be gathered in person, but grateful to at least be able to join you in this way.
Absolutely. So if you want to take about 10 minutes or less to go ahead and talk to the viewers directly and tell us a little bit about your platform.
Well, sure. Thank you. And thanks again. Look, I'm Cal Cunningham. I'm honored to be the Democratic nominee for this U.S. Senate seat. I'm excited to be here with you in this way. I will tell you, when I first kicked off this campaign about 1.5 years ago, my first visit was to Wilmington, the day that we kicked off the campaign. We also, as a team, came to Wilmington and helped rebuild a house that had been damaged in one of the hurricane floods. I'm very fond of New Hanover County. My wife and kids and I come every chance we get. It's a beautiful place, and a place that I look forward to the opportunity to represent. So we're working tonight to get ready for our 3rd and final debate, but I'm glad that we get this opportunity this morning to spend a little time together. Look, the struggles I'm hearing from folks across our state are really almost hard to believe, the way that we are having to come together to deal with this public health crisis. Folks who have lost health care, and with it the peace of mind about how to see a doctor here in the midst of a pandemic. North Carolinians who are putting it all on the line to start small businesses or grow their small businesses, but with headwinds like we may not have ever seen in our lifetimes. We're being challenged as a country. And just as I stepped up after 9/11 and joined the Army Reserves and ran towards the fight that our nation was facing at that time, I'm asking North Carolinians to put me in this fight right now, to take on the big challenges that are facing us. Look, North Carolina is a place that I know well. I love it. I was raised here. I'm very much a product of this state, and I want to give back to it. I grew up in the small town of Lexington. We're very proud of our barbecue in Lexington. We used to be a furniture capital. Trade deals have done a lot of damage to my part of the state. But from a young age, I learned the value of hard work. I learned the value of $1. working on the family brickyard, stacking brick, driving a front end loader and a forklift. I worked in the maintenance department and learned how to grease rotors up on top of big pulleys and conveyor belts. Look, I learned the value of service growing up in that town, active in church and youth group and scouting, doing mission work through my church. And I grew up at the feet of a small town lawyer, my dad, who at night would come home. He had taken on all of our neighbors' causes, not all, but a lot of our neighbors' causes as his own. He would go down to the small courthouse in Lexington and take on some of the biggest interests in the world. And right there at that small courthouse, I learned that often in our country, often in America, that justice requires a fight. And the spirit of service and of hard work and of fighting for causes of justice are part of why after September 11th, I answered the nation's call, served with the paratroopers and the special operations troops just up the river from you at Fort Bragg. Very proud to have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, taking on the nation's challenges. Growing up in that small town, I learned that small business is the backbone of our economy. And here in the midst of this public health emergency, we need to work hard and work together to make sure that our people are strong, our people are healthy, that we defeat this virus, and that we do what we need to do to get this economy going again. I've supported a number of the measures out of Washington, including the Paycheck Protection program that help put low interest and hopefully forgivable loans in the hands of small businesses, including, very importantly, making sure that our African-American, our women-owned and our veteran-owned businesses have equal access to those resources. It's part of the reason that I've called on Congress to add additional support in COVID relief. We've got so many North Carolinians right now who need unemployment assistance in order to put food on the table. We need to support our local governments. And I've had conversations with a lot of our local government leaders, our mayors and our city council members, including in New Hanover County, who are working hard to deliver services in the midst of this pandemic, but having a very hard time. We need to support our healthcare professionals. There's much that we need to do in housing assistance, in food assistance, in order to triage through this moment, defeat the virus, and get the economy going again. Let me just say very quickly and in closing, and then I'd love to hear from you. A part of what I've done in military service as a prosecutor here and overseas is take on corruption, government contractors that are stealing tax money, disrupting the mission. When I look at Washington today, I see a corruption that needs to be fought. I see special interests and I see partisan interests getting in the way of us tackling some of the biggest challenges, whether that be in defeating this virus, in healthcare, in investments in public education, in doing things like how we respond to hurricanes and the underlying challenges to our environment. I want to go to Washington and reform Capitol Hill. I want to go to Washington and fight that corruption to get focused on the issues that are important to us. Finally, I would say this. My Aunt Sis was an elementary school teacher, and from an early age, she taught me that a good listener is a good learner. I believed and come to believe that whether serving in elected office, building a small business as I have, I've run a small business the last 6 years, whether it is serving in the Army, that listening is actually the key to leadership. So I intend to lead by listening. And that means building partnerships and relationships. It means hearing your questions, hearing your voices, lifting them up, and being your champion and advocate in Washington. I'd be grateful to earn your support, and I'm grateful for this opportunity this morning. With that, thank you.
Okay, let's jump into those questions and see how many we can get in the next 20 minutes for you. So first one up is, do you support the new COVID-19 bill that Speaker Nancy Pelosi pushed out this week?
Well, let me say, I haven't had a chance to evaluate that bill, but what I would say is that I'm hopeful that what she is doing and the message out of the White House means that negotiations are underway again. Look, we need COVID relief. There have been sitting in the Senate measures for almost 3 or 4 months. The Senate, rather than try to work across party lines like the Senate must do in order to accomplish COVID relief, instead has tried a partisan effort, which was doomed to fail and did in fact fail. We need our Senate to be part of the discussions and part of the negotiations. I'll try not to be too partisan. I know that an election is a choice. I know that you just heard from Senator Tillis. We need our Senate working across party lines, as I would do, in order to deliver COVID relief. I'm hopeful that with the House taking steps and the White House indicating that it's at the negotiating table again, that the Senate and the Senate leadership will join those negotiations, because I hear from people across this state about the urgent need to extend unemployment assistance, housing assistance, food assistance, healthcare, supporting our local governments, and putting resources in the hands of our educators, critical to making sure that we can educate our children in the midst of this pandemic. I've lost your vote.
Would you sign a pledge stating you would never vote to defund the police?
Well, I don't know about a pledge, but how about I just talk about my own record? Because one of the questions I heard posed to Senator Tillis earlier was about misleading ads. We had a debate last week where he charged that I had cut law enforcement by 22%, which has been fact-checked and proved to be completely bogus. Look, I've been a prosecutor and worked with law enforcement. I have been vice chair of Governor Cooper's Crime Commission, where I sit shoulder to shoulder with our sheriffs, our law enforcement leaders, and others. And let me just be very clear, in this campaign, I have renounced defunding the police, and I have made clear by proposing new resources to law enforcement, a new strong Department of Justice grant funding program, putting additional money in the hands of our law enforcement, sheriffs, police chiefs, and others who need those resources in order to adopt best practices, to bring about reforms, make sure that they have what they need. I also hear from law enforcement leaders about the critical need for us to expand Medicaid, because law enforcement leaders tell me, and I think it makes sense, we can't arrest our way out of some of the mental health and substance abuse problems that land at the feet of law enforcement. Law enforcement needs a robust public health option and public health response to deal with some of what it's challenged by. I support law enforcement. I'm going to work with law enforcement. I've proposed additional resources to law enforcement, and I think it is the wrong direction to talk about taking resources away from law enforcement. Now, if we want to talk, well, I'll leave Senator Tillis's record alone, but he has proposed cutting resources to law enforcement.
You mentioned ads, and that was a question I said I would ask both candidates. So what things are not true that your challenger is saying about you in their TV commercials?
Well, thank you for that question. They have been throwing a lot of mud. It's the silly season. One ad in particular was so egregious. You know, in politics, both sides take a lot of liberties. And we try very hard as the campaign that I control to hew very closely to what is documented and what is factual. But allies of Senator Tillis went so far beyond the pale in mischaracterizing both my support for the Paycheck Protection program, but also a loan that was acquired by the company where I used to work. They went so far beyond the pale that TV stations took the ad off the air. You know, with a First Amendment, you can say almost anything about a public official, but they went so far beyond the pale that the ads had to be taken down. I mentioned the cuts to law enforcement that Senator Tillis talked about, the allegations about use of a historic tax credit, which was approved by the McCrory administration's own Department of Cultural Resources, a program that Senator Tillis himself has spoken in favor of. So look, Ed, I recognize that it's the silly season. It is a time where both sides are trying to take advantage. I'm working hard to tell North Carolinians who I am, the values that I bring into this campaign, the roots that I have that run so deep in North Carolina, why I love this state and what I would take to Washington, the values and priorities that I would take to Washington. And that's what I'm spending my time on in this campaign, focused on who I am and what I would do to earn the votes of the people of this state.
Okay, and one more repeat question for you because this is an important policy issue for us here on the coast, and it has to do with coastal flooding and what we saw during hurricane effects. So what would you do, or where do you see the federal government's role in helping improve resiliency into current and future infrastructure projects to lessen the impacts of storms, decrease flooding impacts?
Well, look, first of all, I'm informed in this conversation both by my military training, which includes a very significant component on how to respond to emergencies, how we have to collectively use all the tools available to a federal government and work with our state and local partners in order to have a robust response. Resiliency is at the heart of it. We need to bring into our planning processes anticipation and planning as it relates to what the flooding experiences are. We have to follow the science and we have to be keen to it. We talked and we heard a little bit about FEMA earlier. As a senator for North Carolina, you can bet that I'm going to be staffed and frankly would love the guidance of local leaders in New Hanover County and in Wilmington about making sure we are staffed to be a strong advocate in dealing with FEMA when it comes to emergency response. I know that there is a state component. Much of those resources also flow through the state. We need to bring these considerations into our planning, but I think we also need to recognize that one of the root cause challenges that we face is an Atlantic Ocean that sea levels are rising and the temperature of the Atlantic is rising, that we have a crisis facing us in our climate, and that we need a national response to that. Rooted in North Carolina's experience investing in clean and sustainable forms of energy, in solar, in appropriate wind, and making sure that we as a state share the impacts with the nation of the flooding that we've experienced. As pointed out, Wilmington lost access through I-40. When I-95 is underwater, it's shutting down and impacting commerce on the eastern seaboard. If we follow the Cape Fear River back up to Spring Lake and Fayetteville, it's shutting down entrances and exits to Fort Bragg. There are national security implications for us failing to grapple with the big challenge of the climate crisis. And so I intend in Washington to tell that story, the story of making sure that we are ready and resilient and doing what we need to combat this climate crisis. But second, and related to that, we need to make sure that we tell the positive story of how if we invest in wind and solar, we can create jobs and the economic opportunities of tomorrow. You know, we have in North Carolina solar installations second only to California. And we have now created almost as many solar connected jobs in our state as West Virginia has coal jobs. We are a beacon of clean energy and we ought to make sure that the country knows that.
Let's move to the Supreme Court and some issues surrounding that. One issue that's come up is whether or not the Supreme Court should expand, and Vice President Biden has been asked about this issue throughout the campaign. What are your thoughts on that?
I've been very clear, and I said this into the camera in our debate last week. Even Justice Ginsburg said that 9 is the right number for the Supreme Court. And I know that I'm speaking directly to voices in my own party. And let me be very, very clear. I think it's the wrong path to go down, and it won't happen with my vote. I think we should, this is part of why elections have consequences. I've made very clear that the next Senate and the next president should take up the question of the vacancy on the Supreme Court. This is how we bring the partisan tenor down rather than injecting more partisanship into something that is not good for our country and it's not good for the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. We need a thoughtful confirmation process, and we need to do it after the election. I don't think it is right for members of my party and voices within my party to be talking about expanding the court. I think that injects further partisanship into something that needs less partisanship. And this is just one of a number of times where I'll be very clear. There are times when I will disagree with my own party, and you're going to hear me as an independent voice for North Carolina speak up and speak out. And I hope that you recognize in that a similar proud independence that we share as North Carolinians. I'm proud to be a Democrat, but I'm a North Carolinian first, and I'm going to be speaking what I think is truth to power when that's necessary.
So along those lines, if it were delayed, the confirmation vote in the Senate, and if you were elected, would you vote to confirm Amy Coney Barrett?
I think that nobody should get put on the Supreme Court without an extraordinarily thorough job interview. And that is a process that we need to go through and that we have not gone through. Look, within hours of the announcement of the death of Justice Ginsburg, my opponent in this campaign had put out a press release that he would both call for an immediate vote and approve whomever the President of the United States sent to the Senate, whomever, sight unseen. Look, the Senate is a co-equal branch of government. It is part of a check and balance on the executive. It has an independent duty of advice and consent. I've made it clear that I would meet with this nominee. I would meet with any nominee, whether it's a nominee of President Trump or a nominee of a President Biden. I would ask questions of that nominee to make sure that that person is suited for a lifetime appointment. But what we have seen going on on Capitol Hill already is giving her a pass on her job interview. And we're talking as a group of small business people here. Who gets a job without a job interview? And especially who gets a job for the rest of their life without a job interview? We need thoughtful hearings. That's exactly what I would do. I would ask her lots of questions, including why it is that she's already written that she would strike down the Affordable Care Act. I would ask her questions about the decisions that she has issued and her judicial philosophy. I would never prejudge her just because she's sent over by a president from another party. By the same token, I would never agree to approve a nominee just because it came over from the president of my party.
Okay, and a reminder, we have roughly 5 minutes left with Mr. Cunningham if you want to get your questions in as well. I'm going to move over to water quality and Gen X. We have several questions that have come up throughout our broadcast today about Chemours and holding them and other companies accountable. What would you do if you were elected on that?
Well, first and foremost, the small business that I built started in 2013 and scaled it, headquartered in Raleigh, but working all across the country, is an environmental-based business. And I'm a very strong believer that the polluter should pay, and that polluters, those who would contaminate our water table, should be responsible for the full cost of the impacts of what they've done to our water table. And so first and foremost, I'm going to pursue laws and policies that are rooted in that very philosophy. Polluter pays. With respect to what is happening there, I want to make sure that local citizens who are impacted all the way down through the water table have full recourse. I want to make sure that that company is responsible for and takes steps and takes actions to clean up the impacts that it's causing on the water table. And I hear it from folks in the southeastern part of our state. Not just with respect to that particular company, but when we have the flooding that we've had, the satellite images of the impacts, the nitrogen and phosphorus that's coming down through the water tables, down through the Cape Fear, we have a number of upstream needs to make sure that those who would have impacts on our water table are accountable for that. That's an incredibly important principle that needs to be adopted by the people that the Senate approves in charge of the regulatory agencies. And it's particularly important as it relates to the Gen X and the PFAS impacts on the water table from Chemours in particular.
Okay, and related to that, we have a question more on the regulation side. So other states are setting PFAS regulations and their senators are calling for reform by the EPA on how they regulate these chemicals. What would you do to fight for clean water at the Senate level?
Well, look, it starts with reversing efforts to rewrite what is a stream. We have seen through the EPA and through the rulemaking process what has really been an industry assault on what was a very stable regulatory structure that strikes balances between our need to develop our economy and protect our people. And we have become entirely too tilted in the direction of those who would have negative impacts on our public resources, our water and our lands and our air. When I was in the state Senate, to use an example, I was a primary sponsor of clean air legislation that benefited in particular the western part of our state. We required scrubbers to be put into coal-fired power plants Those scrubbers were made in Durham, so we created jobs in North Carolina. But 18 years later, since co-sponsoring that legislation, we've seen an 80% reduction in SOx and NOx and the particulate matter around Grandfather Mountain in our western mountains. Similarly, we need to bring together stakeholders and work to make sure that the regulatory structure and the rules that we're operating under fairly balance the need for us to develop our economy, but protect our public health. And right now, when we have industry leaders writing those rules, when we put people in charge of regulatory agencies that are part of business and industry, who are doing as much to represent the interests of industry as the public health needs of our people, we've gone too far in the wrong direction. And I'm going to work with those, both first federal, but also lend a voice to the state regulatory authorities to make sure that we strike the right balance and protect public health.
Okay, Genesis Blocks, Gerard Newkirk has a question on trade. What impacts do you think NAFTA and other WTO deals have had on North Carolina manufacturing and agriculture?
Well, look, I'm glad you asked that. I grew up in Lexington and I raised my family in Lexington after school. And I lived 3 blocks away from what today are empty buildings that are being taken down, where furniture manufacturing used to thrive. It used to be the backbone of the middle class in my hometown. And I saw furniture across my region. I saw textiles terribly, terribly impacted from NAFTA and the way in which China has corrupted the rules of the WTO. This is actually an area where I would work with President Trump in a second term if he were elected to a second term. He has appropriately diagnosed the fact that our trade deals need to be revisited. I believe and know that on a fair and level playing field, American workers can outbuild, out-innovate, outproduce anybody in the world. But with currency manipulation, with the way in which WTO rules have been bent, with the way in which we failed to put environmental and labor standards into NAFTA, we have created a very uneven playing field. It's part of why I think the USMCA is an improvement on the NAFTA that has done damage to our state. But I'm also hearing, again, I think the president appropriately has diagnosed the problem, but some of the remedies he's been pursuing are about to kill the patient, and particularly in farming. And I've been talking to farmers throughout this campaign about the tariffs and the way in which they are collapsing our markets overseas. Corn prices, soy prices today, unlike we've seen since the 1980s. No market for our soybeans, no market for our tobacco. Farmers are hanging on for dear life right now. And of all things that President Trump is, he's not a farmer. And we need an advocate for North Carolina to step up and call on him to appropriately renegotiate these trade deals, make sure that markets are open, but not to collapse our agriculture in the process.
Okay, great. Thank you for joining us and running through all those rapid fire questions. I appreciate it. Mr. Cunningham, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Have a wonderful conference, and I look forward to the next time when I get to come to Wilmington, and look forward to seeing everybody in person.
And everyone who's been watching, thank you for joining us. Hopefully you got a lot of information out of this for this particular race. Stay tuned for the Business Journal's coverage in the coming weeks. We will be going through the other elections, both local and state, and trying to inform you about those candidates, and I'm sure WECT is as well. For today, we are moving our conference, which is our final day of our Wilmington Biz Conference and Expo, over to our conference platform. But thank you for joining us for our keynote. If you want to see other interviews and sessions today, including a talk that we have coming up at 9:30 with the heads of New Hanover Regional Medical Center and Novant Health about the upcoming sale proposal, you can join us at WilmingtonBizExpo.com for information about how to join on there. And I just want to thank everybody for their thoughtful questions today and for the candidates for joining us. Have a great afternoon.